Indonesian access to the Indonesian market. On the 10th of February, I asked the Minister representing the Minister for Trade, Senator Birmingham, about market access for Australian primary produce in Indonesia, specifically table grapes. Senator Birmingham offered to accept direct representation from farmers, and those would be advocated on to Indonesia. So I thank the Minister for that. I'm aware that at least one farmer has taken up his offer. What is the state of that representation? It's a grape grower from South Victoria, I believe.
Yeah, thanks, Senator. So I can't speak to what the representations were from the farming sector to Minister Birmingham specifically, but both Minister Littleproud and Minister Birmingham are very well aware of the issues that they're facing, that the industry is facing in gaining access to Indonesia for table grapes this season. So there appears to be a problem with the Indonesian government signing off on approvals for Indonesian importers to bring in Australian table grapes. Both ministers have been working closely with the department and Minister Birmingham's department to raise this issue at the most senior levels. Minister Littleproud has written to his counterpart, Minister Limpo, seeking his assistance to urgently resolve this issue. Senator Birmingham, as I understand it, has raised the matter also with the coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs in Indonesia to resolve the issue as well. And our head of mission, our ambassador in Jakarta, is also making representations on behalf of the sector. I might just ask Mr. Creaser if there's anything that he wants to add to that issue.
So Peter Creaser, Assistant Secretary for Plant Systems and Strategies. Probably the only other thing I would add to that, Senator, is that we are in regular contact with the PIC industry body, the Australian table grapes industry that does represent growers across Victoria and other states. And so that representation made by them, we have been continually engaged with them over this period of time. It is really critical for that industry to get those permits. And so we're very conscious of the importance of this matter to the industry.
Well, not only because China, but also because Indonesia. Well, I've got a few more questions on that. So do you have any time frame for the outcome? I guess it's difficult.
Yeah, look, really, we're very much beholden to Indonesia's process here, and as Mr. Thompson's indicated, it's very much in the hands of the Agriculture Minister to sign the appropriate paperwork.
Okay, perhaps we might have another discussion or an extended discussion, because are you aware that Indonesia has a policy of self-sufficiency in agriculture? To quote Indonesian President Joko Widodo, he said, quote, "I'm convinced that in the next 4 or 5 years, we'll be able to achieve the so-called food self-sufficiency, food security and food sovereignty," Joko said in his opening speech for the Jakarta Food Security Summit in 2015. So his 4 or 5 years is now. In last year's presidential debates, President Widodo refused to contradict his main rival, General Subianto, when he called for a total ban on food imports to protect Indonesian farmers, a total ban. And has your department considered that we have signed a free trade agreement that strikes at the heart of the Indonesian policy of food self-sufficiency and as such won't be honoured?
So we are aware of the Indonesian government's aspirations in relation to, and their policy in relation to food self-sufficiency, but also importantly balancing that with food security, Senator. And we're very conscious also that the Indonesia-Australia Closer Economic Partnership Agreement represents a very significant step forward in the improved trade arrangements between the two countries, in particular in relation to agricultural product. And I understand the government has no fears about, at this stage at least, of Indonesia honouring the IACPA, as we intend to do so.
President Widodo, on his recent visit, to sign the Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, did not accept the food importation aspects of that agreement in his remarks. Did not mention, the food importation aspects of that agreement in his remarks. Is that correct?
I'm not aware of that, Senator, sorry.
The 45-point joint communique between our Prime Minister and the Indonesian President, issued after the signing, mentioned most other aspects of the Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, but did not mention market access for agriculture. Is that correct?
I did scan that document at the time of the President's visit, but I don't recall agriculture not featuring in it.
So what confidence can Australian farmers have to make business decisions to invest in export crops when Indonesia appears to have no intention of honouring the agreement?
Senator, I would like to perhaps request that you reconsider what you've just said in saying that the Indonesian government has no intention of honouring this agreement. I don't think that you are in a position to say that. And I'd respectfully suggest that that is not a helpful comment for a Senator of the Australian government to be saying.
So I understand your concern, but I'm just quoting the two senior officials in Indonesia, the President and his rival for the presidency. So they both seem to support food self-sufficiency and banning of imports of agricultural products.
Yeah, Senator, their desire for food self-sufficiency is obviously a very honourable desire for them to have, but to then extrapolate that out as that they were not intending to honour an agreement that they've entered into with the Australian government, I think is a bridge too far.
Well, I have a lot of respect for you, Senator Ruston. However, all I'm doing is quoting them. I'm not extrapolating, and it's not a bridge too far.
No. The point that I took offence to and suggested that you might reconsider is when you said that you believe that the Indonesian government was not intending to honour its agreement. The comments you've made from that release are one thing, but to say that you don't believe that they will honour the agreement, I think is taking it a step further, and I would ask you to reconsider that.
So is it let's put it another way then, is it a possibility that the Indonesian government would honour the commitments of the Indonesian President in the last election and the Indonesian opposition leader in the last election?
I think, given the very close economic relationship that we have with Indonesia, I think it's reasonable to expect that, like us, and the Indonesian government will honour the agreement that it has with Australia.
So nations, are you aware that nations can use non-legislative barriers, such as bureaucrats waiting 6 months for import licences, or not staffing an office for import licences adequately?
So-called non-tariff trade barriers,
Yes.
Senator, feature around the world. In fact, some people accuse Australia of employing those tactics, which of course we completely reject.
And our lack of subsidies here would tend to reinforce your
That's
position.
right. So look, we strongly believe, and I think the evidence shows that there is a very strong flow of trade between Australia and many countries, and we are overwhelmingly a significant exporter of agricultural products and food to many countries, including Indonesia.
Yes, that doesn't mean, though, that we can't be a bigger exporter or that there aren't restrictions,
Well,
officially or unofficially, in our way.
And there's been some discussion earlier about the aspirations of the NFF and the wider industry to grow to a $100 billion industry, and that's going to be achieved by trade. But I do note that that this is in the context of a world where populations are growing, particularly in key markets to our north, where consumers are becoming more wealthy generally, and so Australian agricultural exports have got a very strong future because of the the qualities they have. They're safe, they're clean, they're green nature. So in general terms, agricultural trade will be critical to the growth of the sector, but we find ready markets in relation to the products because the quality of our products are so good.
Well, I agree with you. Our farmers are second to none, aren't they? And yet we don't seem to have the infrastructure planned, and we don't seem to have some of the taxation policies we need to be really competitive, and we don't seem to have the policies that will give us, our farmers, confidence that they won't be ripping out their crops.
I don't agree with that, Senator. I think that Australian farmers have for decades, over a century, shown the extraordinary ability they have in farming this continent and to produce goods that are second to none on the world stage, and will continue to do so. The role of the government, or governments more generally, in facilitating that is really how can we help through promoting research and innovation, through promoting trade and market access, or how do we find ways to not provide impediments? How can we help exporters get their goods away more quickly, particularly where we have a role around export certification, for example. So I think that one of the clear objectives, not only of my department but of our counterpart state departments, is helping our pharma sector grow and prosper, and a lot of that's going to be through trade, and a lot of that's through working with our trading partners. We have a network of around 20 agriculture officials in key locations around the world who are down in the detail on those very issues that you talked about ensuring that there is market access, and of course we work very closely with Austrade and DFAT and the commodity organisations in that goal.
Well, I agree with much of what you said. Having been around the Murray-Darling Basin and outside the Murray-Darling Basin, there's a lot that's left to be desired for ensuring the productive capacity of this country agriculturally into the future.
We can always do better, and again, Senator, part of the discussion here this afternoon has been about investments such as the Future Drought Fund, the ability to provide to help adaptation in what is a drier and warmer climate in a country that many people would say is a pretty difficult place to farm from the outset. So I think that extraordinary capability of our farmers and others in the agricultural sector, their innovation and increasingly their trade focus. Later tonight you'll hear from Meat and Livestock Australia, and of course Australian beef is the champagne of the global beef industry. The quality is second to none. Grass-fed beef and lamb is second to none globally. But there are many areas that governments and industry will continue to work together to ensure that profitability.
And we've got to be careful of things like live cattle bans, which hurt those industries.
Senator Roberts, thank you very much. Okay, Senator Davis.